Oh, thank you, Jeff. I'm trying. Damn it, I'm trying. How's the level this week? Oh, thank you, Quinn. Finally, it only took 34 weeks, and I think I finally got it. Thank you, Brooke. That's great. I today wasn't without its technical challenges. I couldn't get. Oh man, I can't hear the music that you're hearing now, and I don't know why. Because I bought an HDMI splitter that worked 2 weeks ago, but I guess this is live TV. You know what I mean? I mean, it is what it is. All right. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Let me try this button and see what happens. I feel pretty good about this. Hey! Oh, hold on, wait. That was not the transition that you guys have become accustomed to. So let me do this properly here. All right, there we go. Hey! Much better. Oh, look. My hair is looking good. There we go. Yeah, well, it's had a power down cycle for 2 weeks, Brooks. That's the thing. Oh, well. What can you do? Just when I think I've got it right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of Logic Live. My name is Andy. Let me fade this music down. Hold on. There we go. That's so much better. My name is Andy. Welcome to Logic Live headquarters. I'm trying to up my warm, cool, orange, blue color grading game for y'all. I did my very first task. I wouldn't call it a job because it was for free. With Resolve yesterday, I had to edit together college audition videos for my daughter. She's applying for college now, and all I really needed to do was trim 2 trim edits, add a fade up and a fade down, and then re-encode. And I was like, well, if I'm ever going to try to learn a new app, this seems to be the perfect thing, because there's no time pressure. I did use well, Brooks, I started with the cut page, and then I was like, wait a minute, there should be an actual timeline here, and then I moved on. But I did by the time I had to do 6 of them. By the time I got through, I figured out the my 11th set of keyboard shortcuts for switching from select mode to the cut mode, the razor mode. I did go and put a little grade on the footage because me, and I figured out how to save a still and then be able to apply that to other sequences. But I definitely want to give a shout out to David Johns, who did that Resolve for Flame Artists on Logic Live. I think it was 15 years ago or something at this point in the pandemic, but it was great. And so I think a little bit of a theme for today. Hey, man! Speaking of David, there you are, dude. Thank you so much. I finally put the lessons that you taught me to good use. So I just want to say thanks, man. Yeah, I think the theme. Did I take a long shower after I finished? No, but I did. I did go to synagogue and pray. Does that count at all? Uh, Thank you. Okay, good. But I think the theme, a theme for today, is going to be, about trying new things and finding that perfect project or that perfect task, try new things. Because today we're going to talk about Mocha, and I have been when I say threatening, I mean that in the best possible way. But I've been threatening to learn Mocha. I've wanted to learn Mocha for years, and every time I'm about to try to use it, I get super busy. We all know that visual effects now is all about hey, here's a fire. Can you put it out before the world burns? And sometimes that isn't the perfect opportunity to learn something new. I went ahead and tried Mocha 2021 out specifically to use the new Powermesh feature on a job that Jeff and I were working on week before last, and right out of the gate, I was just all right, I'm never going back. Absolutely amazing. So I'm so glad that we're going to cover this stuff today. Let's get right into it. I'm going to try to do this. Wait. Hey, all right, there we go. That worked. Welcome to Logic Live. This is the Mocha Deep Dive with Dan Harvey from BorisFX, and our friend Shain is back as well to be part of the fun. Logic Live is brought to you by Synesys.io, solutions development, integration, and support. Synesys, as you guys who have been following Logic Live for the last 34 weeks, you know that they are my own personal reseller. We've been with them for 15 years, and we could not do what we do without them. They support our offices on both coasts, and I can't say enough wonderful things about the team over at Synesys. Solutions development, integration, and support. Synesys.io, supporting flame artists since 1997. Let's take a minute and talk about the forum, forum.logic.tv. We surpassed 800 members last week, which is kind of amazing. We're still averaging like 65,000 page views a month, which is amazing. And the average response time for new topics is less than 30 minutes. And I'm going to switch back here for a second because I can tell you for a fact that this is true because anybody who's a fan of the forum might have noticed that like a couple weeks ago, I posted about how I was working on a job that had like multi-channel EXRs that I was getting from CG, and I needed to like do a transform to like part of the image. And I was wondering if there was some way in Flame to do that task to like all the layers in a multi-channel EXR. And the short answer to the question is no, you can't. But I got a response back from some lovely people on the forum like very, very quickly. And they gave me some great suggestions, and it certainly helped. I had to do this is for the same job that I was using Mocha on. And I had to, I can tell you that like the first comp, I had to do 4 of these shots, like with water and multi-pass EXRs from CG, excuse me. And the 4th one was far more efficient than the first one. And it's all because of the answers I got back from everybody on the forum. So thank you very much. And I encourage you, if you haven't already, to please sign up for the forum and continue to help grow that community. And, you know, as I'm wont to do, I fade back to the slideshow just as the slideshow is ending. I'll have to speak to the guy who made the slideshow and see if we can improve our odds on that one. So, again, welcome. And, oh, wait, what's Steve saying here? He learned a new trick from the forum. It saved me hours over the course of the job. Well, let's give a hearty round of applause. Well, I guess we'll just do like celebration music to Randy McEntee. I don't know if Randy's with us today, but of course, like the forum would be nothing without him. And so super, super, super thankful for Randy for all that he's done to get the forum going. So let's transition over to Mocha. I'd like to welcome Dan and Ross. If you guys want to start your video and bring your mics online. We've got Dan Harvey coming in all the way from the UK. How's it going, Dan?
Pretty good, yeah.
And Ross Shain, my brother from another mother, who's about, I don't know, maybe an hour north from me, up the river, you know?
Just right up the river. Yeah.
That's it.
Thanks for having us, Andy, and also definitely thanks to Dan for joining us. You know, we love working with Dan.
Yeah, and I'm noticing now, Dan, there's a drum set behind you. This has been the best part of like the whole remote workflow thing, is getting to see everybody's like where they live. You know what I mean? Like you get to be that voyeur and really get to know people. So it seems like there's a set of drums, there's a microphone, and
yeah, I like to do a little recording.
Oh, awesome, man. That's great. That's great. And Ross, of course, you know, we've got the awards.
I have my
back
bass
there.
in here.
You got
I
your
have
bass.
my bass.
Oh,
yeah.
right.
A little bit of green, which is great. I see the pegboard of champions going on back there.
The pegboard, yeah. I got
wonderful.
my Beatles
Oh, yeah,
figures in the back.
Oh, that's
Little
great.
yellow submarine. Yeah.
Nice. So we are here today to talk about Mocha Pro and see some of the great things in the new 2021 release. Like I said already, I've had a chance to play around with Powermesh, and we're going to take a look at that. We're going to take a look at AdjustTrack, and of course, if anybody has any questions as Dan goes through his presentation, please feel free to put them in the Q&A panel just so we can keep track of them, and I'll try to keep track of them in the chat if they end up in the chat. So, would you guys like to take it away, Dan and Ross?
Okay. Anything to say before I start, Ross?
Yeah, maybe I'll just say just a couple of very quick words. I'm not going to be demoing here, but I just want to talk a little bit about the Powermesh. You know, it's technology that we worked on for quite a while. As you guys all know, you know, there's optical flow based tracking in, you know, the motion vectors, and Nuke has smart vectors, and over the last maybe 2 or 3 years, a lot of users have asked us to kind of jump in there and come up with some solutions for the warped surface tracking. And rather than go down the optical flow route, we kind of looked at the planar tracker and just kind of extended it to be a subsurface tracker. So, you know, really the reason we got into this was just kind of looking at alternative ways to solve the same kind of problems. And it's very Mocha centric, as you'll see as Dan gets into it. So yeah, just wanted to kind of mention that.
Okay, shall I begin screen sharing, Andy?
Go for it, brother.
So hi, welcome everybody. My name's Dan Harvey for BorisFX, and today we're going to look at Mocha Pro 2021 in Flame. Most of what we see here in Flame is applicable to other Mocha hosts as well. Anything that can read a map, anything that can host Mocha, anything that can read a Lembit file will do most of the things we're going to see today. I'm going to spend most of the time, in fact all of the time, in batch, because that's where I'm comfortable. So
it's where all the great things happen too, I'd like to say.
Oh yeah. So
all of my biggest crashes have been in batch.
A few custom nodes set up here, so speed things up. So he's got 2 viewports up and get started. So starting with Roto. So historically Roto is, especially with articulated subjects, has been a case of adding multiple shapes and managing your shapes. In this case, we're going to try something a little bit different. So just looking at the overall workflow to bring in Mocha, acquire an OpenFX node, connect that to your source, double click that to open the lower third menu, and then take your pick. I'm lucky, I've got the whole BorisFX product family here, but I'm going to grab Mocha Pro and load that into the OpenFX node. And once we've got Mocha here, not much exposed in the Flame UI, it's all in its own embedded UI here. So if I launch the Mocha UI, that'll open a floating window. And here we see the Mocha UI. So I want to grade the arms of the talent here. So I'm going to start drawing a shape for that. There's a number of different ways that we can draw shapes. I'm going to treat myself and use the magnetic spline tool. So the magnetic spline tool is automatically finding those edges for me. If it can't find an edge, I'll just press the mouse down and keep drawing. So this little indistinct bit down here, it's in shadow, I'll draw with the mouse and let the magnetic spline tool take over where the edges are more distinct. Right click to close the shape. So that'll assign vertices where it thinks it needs to. If I enable the magnetic spline tool again, I can dial up and down on the detail to increase or decrease the number of vertices in the shape. And if needs be, I can edit the shape and delete vertices where I don't want them. It's better not to have too many vertices crowded close together, because when you soften it, if you soften inwards, then it's going to fold the vertices over. So we want to distance the vertices sensibly and get rid of the ones that we don't need. So there's the starting point. So we need to track this. I'm going to track this all as a single shape. Moving down in the track tab to things we can track. So in time-honored tradition, we can track all of the usual types of motion: translation, scale, rotation, shear, and perspective. Now there's a new option, mesh. So when I enable that, it initializes the mesh, which is linked to the current shape. And if we move over here, we can see the parameters for the mesh. It can either be a uniform mesh. If I clear and regenerate, this is a uniform mesh of arbitrarily placed points on a grid. We can decrease the frequency by increasing the size of the mesh, or go the other way and make it finer. In this case, I'm going to use an automatic mode. I'm going to make sure the vertices are on the spline of the shape and then generate the mesh. So that's using the initialized mode. If I enable adaptive contrast here and generate again, Mocha is going to look for subsurface areas that it can track, and all of these different services will contribute to the overall track. I'm going to turn on automatic smoothness. The smoothness value, I'll explain what that's processing. I'm going to kick off processing now and start tracking forward. And this is not the most powerful computer, as you can see. This is a vintage MacBook, so I'm not expecting to break any speed records here. So in this example, I'll let this track, and in subsequent examples, I'm going to load some pre-tracked shapes to save a little bit of time. So to recap, enable mesh, choose your mode. Automatic will automatically place vertices where it can see some detail. Set the size, bigger number, less shapes. Put the vertices on the spline of the shape. Adaptive contrast will then assign additional subdivisions of the shape depending on the detail that it can find. Smoothness, a high value is good for rigid surfaces, and a low value is good for more fluid or flexible surfaces. I've enabled auto smoothness here. I'm just going to let Mocha work it out based on the analysis of the relative movement of all the different vertices. It does a pretty good job on auto. So I'm kind of got halfway through tracking that, and I'm going to look at mesh editing now. So up here we've got a couple of new options, and this is edit mesh. So as with everything else, I can select vertices if I want to add a little bit of roto and manual adjustment into the mix, and I can select my vertices and move those around, and that then sets a keyframe. You can see on the timeline. The reason for that is because auto key is enabled, so every time I make a change to something, it will insert a keyframe. What I'm going to do here is select all of these vertices and now right click for the contextual menu on the mesh, and we can delete points. What I want to do here is copy keyframes, because our talent's done half the work, so I might as well go to the end of the shot and right click and paste the keyframes to save myself the trouble of tracking the rest of it. So we can copy and paste mesh keyframes for individual or groups of mesh points up and down the timeline. So I'm now going to...
That's a guy who never skipped plank day.
Now I'm going to turn off the mesh view and just focus on the shape. So here's my shape, and there's the mat. So that's a bit of a hard edge mat at the moment. I want to shrink this a little bit to get a little bit of edge softness. So I'm going to, once again, I'll select all the vertices on the shape and take a look at the edge width here. So if we get into negative values, this is going to set the inner edge of the shape, this number of pixels away from the original shape. We'll be looking at this functionality a little bit later, because as a general rule, when you're tracking foreground objects, you want to shrink the shape a little bit so your tracker doesn't get caught on background details, especially when there's motion blur and stuff like that. And the opposite applies for track mats, which we'll see later. So there's a soft shape, maybe give it a little bit more softness, something like that. Save the shape down and exit from Mocha. So now this is being applied in the plugin here. So if I view the mat, there's my mat, and I notice that I've made a schoolboy error there and not keyframed my shape properly. So that'll give us a good opportunity to look at something which is quite useful called Uberkey. What I did there was animated the shape softness at a keyframe here, and it was interpolating from no softness on the original frame. So that's on me. So what I'm going to do here is enable Uberkey, which will modify all keyframes. That's what I should have done initially, and select all of those points and set the softness. Now as I drag through the timeline, you'll see that applies across all keyframes. Very handy tool, Uberkey, if the operator remembers to use it.
It's like a ripple edit for some other systems, right, Dan?
Yeah, it's modify all keyframes, as anyone old enough to remember Henry would be to me.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, Dan, can I jump in and just make one comment just to help clarify? One thing that I think is interesting about the mesh tracker is for years, people who have seen us do our training videos, they always see us do make shapes that are kind of outside, that spill outside what, you know, the default planar tracker. We kind of, we're a little bit generous or loose with our shapes, but you have to start thinking about that the mesh tracker is a lot more sensitive, and that's, you know, that's why, you know, Dan created the shape that was so tight around the arms, because it's very sensitive. Every little triangle is like its own tracker, its own planar tracker.
Thanks, Ross. Yeah, we'll be looking at that in a little bit more detail later, and also the inverse supplies for using track mats for holdouts, but we'll take a look at that later. So if we view mat now, we'll see that our mat is soft all the way through. I can add a bit more feather if I need to. So that's basically post blur in the mat. And if I choose to apply mat on the plugin, I'll just show you the mat output here from the node. Nothing happening at the moment, but if I choose to apply mat, then the Mocha mask will be output as the mat out socket from the Mocha node, and then whatever's happening on the foreground, which in this case is nothing. I'm not doing any warping at the moment. I'm just using this to generate a mat. So now I want to do a little bit of color corrections. So I'll go ahead and treat myself to an image node here and connect my mat input here. So I want to use this this Mocha mask to hold back the grade with the image tool. So if I go to secondary number 1 in the HUD for the image tool, I'm going to command in to take a new node out of the image, much as we would do with action, connect the out mat to the front input socket on that that image node. So now that we can use that as a holdout mat for our selective. So I'll jump into the selective and look at the media list. So if I select my Mocha node output here, take a look at that. There's my mat that's coming from Mocha. I can now use this as a holdout for the grade, basically. So I go into the controls page here and choose the input mat from media list object number 1 and turn on the luminance channel. So if we take a look at the mat now, F3 for the mat for this layout, and now we're using that mat to hold out the grade. So if I go into my secondary and start grading, now I'm just grading within that region of interest. So I'm just going to go in the curves tool here and give that a little bit of punch. In my primaries, give that a little bit more of that Scandi noir in the shadows, and toggle that off and on. And in a nutshell, massively simplified Roto for articulated shapes. Big time saver, that one. So now we're going to move on and take a look at warping with the Powermesh toolset. So I'm going to start with something simple. So we've got an object that we want to apply a logo to. Here's the logo. Basically, I've sort of warp that a little bit so that it matches the contours of the first frame of the shot. But now, of course, I need to animate this to follow the motion on the actual live action. So you've got a Mocha node here. I'll launch into that. Because I've got the mat connected here, when we go in, that mat will be applied, and that will be holding out what we see. So everything's grayed out here. If I go up to the enable alpha channel, now we can see the whole picture. So we'll come back and take a look at the alpha channel a little bit later when we've warped it. So this time around, I'm going to use a simple rectangle shape, add a point on the shape. And right click and drag to soften all of the corners at the same time. Single click for one corner, or right click for all corners. Enable mesh tracking. enable adaptive contrast to find those smaller regions to track, turn down the mesh size to increase the frequency of the triangles in the shape, and begin tracking. And once again, not expecting to break any speed records on this little old MacBook, so just do a few frames just to give you an idea of what's going to happen. And stop and rewind. So now it's starting to take shape. To save a little bit of time, I'm going to open the project that I tracked earlier. And here's the finished shape that I tracked earlier. So it's doing its thing. I'm going to turn off the mesh view now and go into the stabilize module. So previously, if you stabilized, you can choose to stabilize any of the parameters. So we're now stabilizing, basically doing a single point stabilization. We can stabilize zoom, like a 2-point track. Or if I choose all motion, then it's going to try and lock that down flat to the relative to the initialized frame, which is frame 0, which I'll set as the reference frame. If I enable mesh warping, on the other hand, and choose unwarp, now the area that I've tracked is locked down. So we'll look at an example later where we can use this for outputting a source of a clean plate for painting and so on for matte painting. What I actually want to do here is warp the matte. So if I go back and turn the matte view on again, now the warp is being applied to the input matte, and you should see the effect of that warp applying there. So that's our matte warped. So if we exit out of here, and this time when I view the matte and apply the matte, now because there's an alpha channel input into this node, what's being warped is not the the matte from the actual from the plugin itself, the shape, but the input matte. So if there's a matte input, then it warps that. If there's not a matte input, then it warps the shape and uses that as the matte to be applied in the composition. So if we feed this up to the color warper and open the curve page here, now you can start grading through that matte. And because stabilize warp is enabled, this is now live. As I'll scrub through, you'll see that that warped matte is pulling that grade through. If that makes sense.
That's excellent.
And just to save a little bit of time, there's the final. So starting simple, just warping the matte and grading through the matte. So the next example, we're going to look at actually adding something to the composition. So clear that out. And here's our talent. Very expressive face, doing a lot of warping here. And here's the Gene Simmons look that we want to apply to this guy's face. So I'm going to launch into Mocha.
Do we know if is Gene Simmons going to request a royalty for this? I know that the KISS is notorious for their licensing control.
Yeah, he's a shrewd businessman, right?
So if I connect that
KISS
up
Army
to the input on Mocha, we'll take a look at what's happening here. So launching at the Mocha UI, that's applying the matte at the moment. That's why it's cutting it out over black. And here's our mask. So just a little introduction to how we built that. That's been pre-built, as you can see. I'll just start with a fresh Mocha node here and just talk you through how we created that that mesh, because there's a couple of relevant topics for other workflows as well. So I'll start off by using the X-spline shape this time. So this is sort of like a smarter version of Bezier splines. Right click to close the shape, right click and drag to set the positions, set the softness of all the vertices. And there's
wow.
So there's my starting shape. Now obviously when he blinks his eyes, this is going to introduce errors into the track, and we also want to protect the eyes, obviously, because we don't want to put the mask on the eyes. So I'm going to go to the Create X-spline Shape tool here, and be aware that whenever there's a little triangle on a tool, that indicates that there are some options available. If you press and hold the mouse or pen, the drop-down menu will show you all the various options for that tool. So what I'm going to select here is Add X-spline Tool to Shape. This is currently just one layer. So when I close that shape off, right click to close, it's still one shape. Let's take a look at the map. When the shape that we've created is inside an existing shape, it's basically a Boolean to that shape. It cuts a hole in it. If it's outside, it acts as a satellite. So this is basically a compound shape that I built here. So just put the vertices where I want them and repeat that for the next eye. And soften off the tension on the vertices. So now you've got a single layer with a couple of holes in it, which serves a couple of purposes. So his blinking won't interfere with the track. So I'll just turn the map view off now and enable mesh tracking, adaptive contrast, and once again begin tracking.
Dan, is there a way, if you created the masks for those eyes, the holdout masks, if you accidentally made them as separate layers, is there a way to copy those and paste them into the same layer as the face?
I don't think so. I think you have to copy. Ross might be able to correct me on this, but you have to have created them with the add shape to add vertices to shape tool. Is that right, Ross?
Well, yeah, that is correct. However, if you do have your layers above, like right now, if you look at the shape that Dan just created and you look at that layer in the upper left, that's one layer, right? So that's when you create a layer using that X plus button. In fact, any of the, all the spline tools have that little plus button, right? If you wanted to add multiple shapes to the layer. And when the shape is inside, it's adding. When it's outside, it's excluding. Sorry, the reverse of that. When it's inside, it's excluding. When it's outside, it's adding. But if you have a layer above it, it's by default, the way Mocha's stack works is you're always adding subtraction shapes. So the same thing, that same exact workflow could be set up. In fact, sometimes when I'm doing mesh tracking, I do like to do that. I like say I want my eyes separate from the track itself. So I'll put those layers above it. And then you have a little bit more latitude over the keyframes and the tracking for each layer, if that makes sense.
Totally. Thank you. And I think that answers, Todd, I think that answers your question too.
Yeah, there's a couple of concepts there. One is the hierarchy, which we'll cover when we look at occlusions, as Ross alluded to. The other is just how you add up the layers in your map. If you want to output a map which has got, for example, this shape for the nose, I've set that to subtract from the composition. So now when we look at this map, the nose is subtracting from it rather than adding to it, if that makes sense.
Totally.
So if we go in here and just look at the selected map, now it's adding. We can set that to additive or subtractive. Also, the hierarchy is important, as we'll find out a little bit later. Mm-hmm. So I've begun tracking our shape. I won't bore you with tracking it all. I've, in time-ordered fashion, created one already. So we'll load that in. And there's my finished shape.
Like the smile at the end.
So I'll save that down. Once again, we can choose to preview, turn the warp off here. We can choose to preview our mesh warp. So that will look kind of freaky because that will double up the distortion. That will try to lock him down and flatten him out. Neither of which we want to do because we want to do the warping to the input mask. I'll call it the Piero mask in case Gene Simmons comes after us. We'll place that in the front input of the Mocha node and choose to stabilize warp and render. If I turn render off, you'll see not a lot happens, just using the mat at the moment. If I turn render on, now the mesh distortion is applied to the front input on that node. Also, if I apply mat and review the mat, now the mat that we're seeing, because there's no mat input into the Mocha node, now the mat we're seeing is the mesh output. I'll put a bit of feather on that, as you can see. I'll take a bit off and put it back on again. So this is going to be our holdout to comp the mask on top of the talent. So here's our blend and comp node. Now we can take our Mocha output from the front output and our mat output from the back, and in blend and comp we can there's my front, there's my mat, and in time-honored fashion I've already made one, so there's the result, and I'll scrub that through. Once again, not super interactive on this little old MacBook, so I'll
Hey, Dan, someone just asked a good question, which you feel free to answer, which is, do the layer inputs have to be the same resolution?
That's the law in Flame. You try and you'll get a little warning if any of the layer inputs are a different res. I'll double check that. So what have we got here? We've got two layers. Are you talking about the Mocha node or any node? I'm pretty sure all Flame nodes.
Well, I don't know. Todd has a question. Do the layer inputs? I assume that you're asking about, do the layer inputs for the mesh warp workflow to have to be the same resolution? And yes, they do. And that's
a Flame API dictates that. So if we got HD going in here, and we'll just test that theory by doing a soft resize on this guy, and we'll make that DCI flat. So this is now resized to DCI flat, and if we try and plug that in there, I bet we'll get a warning light. That's the law. All inputs into any node, native or third party, have got to be the same resolution. So if I disable that resize, now it's all good. So short answer to your question is yes. All node inputs.
Just also to jump to mention too, the way that the mesh warper works, even if you're using the standalone or using it in After Effects or Nuke, it's pretty much, you do, because we're doing the mesh on like a sort of fixed frame size, you do in this workflow, when you're applying the mesh to alpha source, then yeah, they do have to match.
So as well as adding things, we can also remove things. So in the next example, the more observant of you will notice that there's a subtle tattoo to remove from this shot.
Reminds me of my grandmother. She loved to work in the kitchen.
So that's what we need to remove. I've painted up a clean plate. Note that the clean plate that I create is not on the first frame. I'm going to talk about reference frames in this example, and I've also painted a mat for the clean plate. So if I launch into Mocha now, here's my animated mat. And you'll see that doesn't line up at frame 1. So if I just save that down and go to my comp here, where I'm comping that over itself for the warp mat, you'll see that that's somewhat less than convincing because I haven't actually matched the reference frame, if that makes sense. So let's just find that reference frame in Mocha. So I'll launch in. Turn the mat off and scrub through until we find, I happen to know it's frame 29 from memory. So you see this now lines up at frame 29. That's where I created the shape originally, basically because that's when her back was at its flattest point to the camera. If I go into the stabilize menu here, you'll see that this is out of alignment at frame 1. So if we go to frame 29, then we'll find the all-important set reference frame button. So down here is the, not labeled as such, but this is what it does. The frame list button allows us to add the reference frame. So watch what happens now. Now, this becomes the aligned frame relative to which all warping is applied, if that makes sense. So if we save that down and return to batch and scrub through, now we can see our matching frame at frame 29 is now warped before and afterwards relative to the motion in the shot. Once again, I've rendered an example. There's the original and there's the final. So any frame can be used for the clean plate. So if I just reconnect the original plate into Mocha here, turn the mat off for the moment. So now I'm going to take this and choose to unwarp it in the renderer. As I scrub through on the timeline, now you can see the area, the region of interest within the shape has been locked down. Of course, everything around it is also getting the same warp treatment, but that's going to be comped out anyway. But this, the tattoo area is now locked down, and now we can use that as the basis of the matte painting to create the clean plate. So it's for more complex fixes where you're trying to do things on multiple frames, then you do an undistort, matte paint, and then redistort using Mocha undistort, render unwarp, and then render warp on a second node. Using the same, basically.
You just have to duplicate that node, the original Mocha, throw it at the end, and then switch your render mode there.
Exactly.
The module rather. Okay. Cool.
That render mode can have unwarp, and that render mode can have warp.
Cool.
This is actually someone asked in the chat too. Is there any reason why you might want to use the plugin over the standalone? And now that this functionality, having that stabilized warp unwarp is a really nice workflow, but it would kind of be a pain to do. I mean, you could do it in the standalone, but you'd have to render each pass. So it's a much smoother workflow to work in the plugin these days.
So moving on to take a look at something a little bit more challenging with occlusions. So here's our source shot, and we want to put the Mocha logo with its mat onto the trampoline. But there's a small matter of a small boy jumping on the trampoline.
But he's got fabulous shoes. Let's not overlook how awesome those kicks are.
So once again, just to take you through the workflow of how we set this up. I'll start with a primitive shape. I'll enable mesh tracking, enable adaptive contrast. We can either use adaptive contrast to set the mesh points where Mocha detects features, or we can choose our own features. If we go into mesh editing here, this is the Add Points to Mesh tool. This will tessellate the mesh, and you can place the vertices wherever you want them. So sometimes you might want to intervene and set your own tracking points and subdivide the mesh according to your own requirements. So you can do it like that way, or use adaptive contrast and let Mocha guess for us. So no prizes for guessing what's going to happen when I try and track this shape. The legs of the boy are going to interfere with the track. We've got a occlusion problem. So we're going to fix that by drawing a holdout map. So there's our bad track. I'm going to turn off the mesh view for the moment and create a map for the holdout. So as Ross alluded to earlier on, there's a kind of the importance of the layer stacking is critical in the way that the tracks are calculated. This time around, I'm going to use the pen tool to paint a mask, and I'm going to take a little care to go a bit outside the region of interest. This is so that if there are any shadows or ambient occlusion on the background from the foreground shape that we're trying to remove, that won't interfere with the track. So now I've painted with the paint tool. I'll click Quick Mask to generate a mask from the area that I painted. I'm going to label mesh tracking on this layer. Turn the mesh view back on again so we can see the mesh. And processing is enabled both for the foreground and the background objects. They'll be processed simultaneously, but it's important to keep in mind that this guy will be processed first and then be used as a holdout for this guy. So I'm actually going to label this holdout. So imagine the camera is right up the top of here and looking down the Z plane away from the camera. Basically, the further down the list an object is, the further away from the camera Mocha considers it to be. So if I take a look at this layer and show the layers matte, and let's show it in a color that's a bit more obvious, and there's the layers matte. I'm choosing track mats. If I choose selected mats, that's the entirety of the map. If I choose track mat, this is telling me what Mocha is actually going to be using to measure the track. So because the holdout mat is above it, it's considered to be nearer to the camera. Therefore, that detail is not contributing to the track in the bottom layer. So just to make sure that that works, we'll start tracking them both together and track forward. And now this is going to overwrite the previous bad frames on the other track. So now you can see that it's not contributing to the track in the same way. As before, I'm going to open a project which I created earlier, and I've refined the shape for the boy's legs, because we want to use that as a holdout in the composition as well. So I've got basically, this is the original one was a lot fatter, with a little bit of room outside to make sure that that didn't interfere with the trampoline track. And now I've tightened that up so that this mat group can be used as a holdout for the final composition. But this is the shape that we want to apply the warping with. So if we go to the stabilize page, set that as the reference frame for the warping and enable mesh warping. Also worth pointing out here, you can preview draft normal or high resolution and also switch that in flame. Down here, put that on high res, and now connect my front input and my matte input to the Mocha node, enable warp and enable render. And now as we scroll through, we'll see our logo is being warped. So now we need to comp that into the background. So if we look at the result here, hit F4 again for the matte result. There's our warped matte that's going through Mocha and being warped. And remember, we created the shape for the boy's legs as well. So I'm going to duplicate that node. And it needs an input to make it active. So I'll connect that up. Then the light goes off here. I'm not going to use this. I'm just connecting it so that the node becomes active. So now I'm going to view the matte. So there's the matte that we've got at the moment. So all the mattes that we've got in that Mocha project, the trampoline and the boy's legs. But I don't want to use all of these. I just want to use the one for the legs. So if we go into visible layers down here, we can choose which of the layers, we can drill down to the hierarchy if needs be, from the Mocha project we want to use. So I don't want to use the trampoline layer. So I'll hit OK to that. And now I'm just using the refined matte of the legs here. Now we need to combine that with the warped matte that we processed out of Mocha for our composition. So I've got a blend and comp here. I'll feed the matte output from Mocha into the back input on the blend and comp. And I'll take the boy's legs matte and feed that to the front input on the blend and comp. Now you can go down here to the transfer modes, set the transparency obviously, but I want to make this a subtractive blend so that we cut a boy's leg shaped hole in our matte so that we can then do the final comp with this, this blended matte. So here's our final blend and comp here. I'll take my result of my matte blending here into the matte input on that blending comp. I'll take my foreground object here and my background object, and now here's the final result. In the next example, we're going to go a little bit deeper. So Yep.
Hey, Dan, can I jump in 1 second? I just wanted to remind you, and this is another good teaching moment, was in those Mocha nodes that we, or actually you don't even have to go in, that we do have the warp quality setting is definitely something a little gotcha. The default is, I think the default is, yeah, just wanted to, I don't know if you mentioned that and I was missing it. I just wanted to point out that you can change the warp quality, and definitely high quality is what you want for your final.
Thanks for pointing that out, Ross. Yeah, you can do that in the plugin and also in the UI for the plugin.
That's actually a benefit. I don't think we added that to the AE version. I think you have to go into the interface in the After Effects plugin version. So it's kind of nice to see that the OFX has that now. I'm sure we'll add it to the AE one.
So the final example of mesh warp is we're going to go a bit deeper into the compositing in action. So everything I've done up to now has just been simple A over B comping in blend and comp nodes in batch, so kind of flat. If we want to work in action, then the Lembit workflow opens up a few possibilities here. So in this example, we've got a shot of our talent here, to which we want to add an unsightly scar. So if I launch into Mocha, take a look at the Mocha project. Similar kind of workflow from last time. We've got our shape here. We've got a problem with an occlusion, which we've resolved by adding a matte for the hand as a holdout. Just want to touch a little bit on the edge width. So I'm going to hide the face for the moment. So I'm going to select all those vertices. When you're measuring the shape initially, as Ross mentioned before, especially if it's a mesh shape, this is very sensitive to background detail and stuff, especially on blurred, motion blurred edges and so on, or out of focus edges. If we take the edge width into a negative value, this will soften away from the original edge. If I now want to make this a solid matte, because this is describing the softness at the moment, if I want to make this a solid matte, then any positive value that I enter now will be a positive offset away from the inner edge. So if I set 0 as the value here, then I'll have a solid matte right down to the inner edge. And that workflow obviously works in reverse. So for tracking your meshes, sometimes a little bit tighter matte is useful. Conversely, if you're using a holdout map to protect an area which is being occluded, then you need to increase the size of the holdout map to make sure that there's no shadows or ambient occlusions on the background that you're trying to protect. So this workflow with edge softness is quite handy for that. Anyway, we've got a shape for the face, and we've got a shape for the hand that we can use in the composition a bit later. I'm going to turn that off for the moment. And I want to use this in action. So we're going to export the mesh as a Lembit geometry cache. So with that layer selected, I'll go to Export Track here and choose Lembit mesh data from the drop-down list. Once again, here we can set the reference frame, which is the undistorted frame relative to which everything else will be warped. So I'm going to set that as frame 0 because that's where I drew the initial shape. So we'll call it scar and stick that on the desktop. So that's written a geometry cache of those frames. So now I'll jump into action. So in action, if I go to the action result view and right click for the contextual menu, I can import that Lembit geometry cache to the action project. So there's what I just wrote out, and I'll load that in. It's now, I don't know if you noticed that my Mocha project started at frame 0, and this is detecting a mismatch in frames because my batch starts at 1. So it makes sense to align at frame 1 in this case. So now I'm looking through the Mocha camera at the result. So it's going to drop into the action schematic. The Mocha coordinate system is different from the action coordinate system. So if I go into the default camera in action, we don't see what the Mocha camera is seeing. So I'm going to select the Mocha camera from the Lembit import and look through that. Now we're looking at our geometry cache through that camera. And there's our geometry, and I want to texture map that with my scar image. So if you go into the media page here, select the scar image and right click on the geometry and add a diffuse map. That's now texture mapped onto our geometry, and using the offset axis here, we can set the scale and orientation of that as required. So something like that. Now go back to the geometry node and then change the blending mode. So if we change this to multiply, then that will just darken that down. Or maybe multiply rather than darken, that's what I was after. And a little bit of transparency. And as you can see, as we scrub through, you can see that's following the warp on the shape. But you've got the occluding hand problem. So if you could do this in action, but I find it easier to do as another comp in batch. If we go back to our original Mocha node where we did the original track measurement, we open that up and view the map. The currently selected map is the map for the face. So if we once again go to visible layers and choose to display the hand mat. Here's the hand mat. So we can then take that mat into the comp to hold out the hand from the final comp, in theory. So our action is the foreground. Our action is the background. And that's our original plate. And we can comp those over, I think. And we go here. There's the final version. Which way around was it? Yeah. So we cut out the clean shape with the hand mat and then comp that back on top of the comp. So now the hand is getting in the way of the scar as we intended. So as Ross mentioned, you know, there have been some workflows in the past with optical flow and motion vectors and stuff like that, but they can be pretty processor heavy. This is a pretty efficient way of working because it uses, you know, it's a lot less processor intensive. You can generate quite complex shape by meshes by subdividing the shape as required. And there's all the good stuff in Mocha for massaging your track and making sure that you can get rid of occlusions and all these nasty things that can spoil tracks in the host applications. One final refinement, which is a small thing, but just, you know, an example of that depth that we can go in Mocha to really clean up our tracks, is the improvements to the AdjustTrack functionality in Mocha 2021. So AdjustTrack is a tool set that's been around for a while, and it's basically a workflow whereby you can add additional keyframes non-destructively at another layer, another level of the track to correct a drifting track. So in this example, here's my shape that I'm tracking. Typical example for screens and devices, you track the bezel, not the screen, because that's, you know, may have things on it, you know, from the device, or it may have reflections or whatever that's interfering with the track. So I've tracked the bezel, and if I turn off the shape overlay and focus instead on the surface overlay, this is showing me what the track is doing. Not bad, but it is drifting a bit because of the occlusions and the reflections and so on. So it needs a little bit of help to refine that. And that's where AdjustTrack comes in. So if I go to the AdjustTrack tab, you now see you've got a new tab in here called Transform. For fans of the old workflow, if we switch to classic workflow, you can use the same tool sets that you've been familiar with for years, but there are some nice new things in the Transform tab with some new tools. So basically with AdjustTrack, we're adding some additional keyframes on top of the original track to correct it. So we can add keyframes for any of the parameters. So if we set a point, this point will correct for position, 2 points to correct for scalar rotation, 3 points for shear, or 4 points for perspective. So I've set points to influence all of the different types of motion parameters. And that then becomes the initialized frame, the reference frame for all subsequent frames. So it's pretty good up to the point where it starts moving. So I'm going to set a keyframe here. Once again, auto key is enabled. So anything I do here will set a keyframe, not just for the point that I adjust, but for all points, which is quite handy. So if we go to the first frame where it starts to drift, and use that as an example, what's the surface overlay when I move my AdjustTrack point? In the zoom window, this zooms in sub-pixel to help us accurately place the new point. Now I'm going to switch to the next point, the bottom right-hand corner. and now I'm going to be lazy and hit auto, and that automatically searches for a match. Notice that obviously the motion blur means it's quite a different pattern, but it's still managed to find it. If I want to massage it, then I've got these arrow keys. These are also used, work with the arrow keys on your computer keyboard to nudge it into place. Now I'll select the next one and auto match that, nudge it into place. And now the other point, and there's me hitting spacebar to pan, but I'm in Mocha, and it's X to pan, spacebar to play. That one's out of frame, so I'll use the edges of the shape to align that one. So now, as we move through, you'll see that our track is sticking a lot better. So as we move to another frame where it's starting to drift, Z double click to reset the zoom and set the next keyframe. Notice the blue keyframes on the bottom of the timeline is distinct from shape keyframes, which will be green keyframes on the upper part of the timeline. So now I'll set my reference points. You get the general idea. Bit of wackiness going on there where the occlusion happens. So massage that in. Select the next one. Auto match that in, and the next one. Something like that. So now you can see my surface indicates that my track is a lot better than before. And this is applied non-destructively on the top. So if we want to go back to square one, we can reset and set new points. But that's doing the job I want it to do. So if we go back to the track page, and for this layer, choose to insert the Mocha logo. And now go to the insert page to change the orientation of our insert. We'll just set that to appropriate size. And set the transparency. And scrub through just to get a preview of the result. And there's a bit of motion blur going on, and the motion blur is the reason why it was drifting, obviously. So we want to match that on the foreground. So if I go into the insert page and enable motion blur, park on a frame where it's moving quickly, and do a quick test render of that. Now you can see the motion blurs matching what's going on in the background. Switch back to view the selected layer, save that down, and jump into Mocha. And this time I'm going to choose to render the insert, and now take a look at the final result. Obviously need to do a bit of work with the occlusion, but we know the workflow for that as from previous examples. So the improved AdjustTrack tool is another little blade in your Swiss Army knife to really finesse your track data and your meshes to get the best results, and that's kind of what makes Mocha an invaluable addition to the Flame toolset. That's all I had prepared. I'm going to hand back to Ross and Andy. Let me know if you have any questions.
That was awesome, Dan. Thank you so much. There were a couple of questions that I wanted to circle back and try to get answered. The first one was about just showing off the export option to Gmask Tracer.
Okay, so let's go back to one of those other examples and so take the mask guy, for example. So that was so if I go into Mocha, this is where I'm warping my shape. Launch into Mocha. And if I want to send this out as a Gmask, then well, this is actually a compound shape with a bunch of different things inside, but do something a little bit simple with a individual shapes. So if we go to the scar example, and we'll take that hand shape, for example. So if we go in here, it's the hand shape that we want to use in Gmask or Gmask Tracer. Launch into Mocha. Select the, in fact, we'll take the face shape, because that's got keyframes everywhere. So if we now choose to export the shape from the track menu, export shape, various options here. So here we can export as a Gmask, Gmask script, basic tracer, or shape plus axis. So I'll choose that option. We can choose what layers we export. In fact, let's go for it and select all layers and save that, put that on the desktop. Close out of Mocha and a Gmask tracer node. I guess, I haven't done this before, but I guess it would be load from here, wouldn't it? So if we go to the desktop, select that, and there's our Gmask shapes imported into Flame. That makes sense?
Yeah, that was definitely a long request from the Flame users. Hey, Andy, can I ask Dan a question quick, which came from Jeff, I believe, Jeff Kyle. Dan, you showed the Lembit workflow in batch, but someone had a question, Jeff had a question, could you use that Lembit workflow to do a reverse stabilization in the same way that the Mocha render workflow works? I know how, I personally know you can do it in Nuke. I assume it could be done in Flame.
I'm not aware of a way you could do it in Flame. I'll have to think about that one.
Because the Lembit render in Flame is quite fast, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Lembit file is basically a geometry cache. So
yep.
That doesn't actually expose any keyframes in the channel editor. I think it's a different workflow in After Effects, for example. You can actually export animated After Effects nulls, I think. But
you can, yes. And in Nuke, I know in Nuke it's the same Lembit file, and you can invert that data. I'll have to look at it, and maybe or maybe Dan and I can talk about it after and see if we can figure it out and get back to you, Jeff.
Yeah, sure. The short answer to that one is I haven't tried it and I don't know. But I know you can't do it in the channel editor because there's no. It's basically, you know, for 100 frames, it's 100 geometries. It's animated. It's a geometry sequence. That's what comes into Flame. You can't.
Yeah, I did an Lembit export out of Mocha, and the only thing I got the shape and I got a camera, this to answer Jeff, but the camera didn't have any keyframes. And even the Lembit itself didn't have keyframes. It just had it had animation baked into the shape.
Yeah, so we are looking at, and this is also kind of a little hit someone else's question. You know, some Nuke users and maybe probably Flame users as well would like to have the mesh data in different types of formats, like for example, as an ST map. That it is on our list. If users want 2D nulls in the same way that we are exporting After Effects, that might be another thing that we'd add for Flame. So, you know, if there's things that you guys want to see, certainly just jump on. We do have a Mocha Forum on the BorisFX website, and you know that's the best way to get in touch with me or any of the other people on the Mocha team if you wanted to submit feature requests, and you know that's always a great way to talk to us.
All right, great. Let's see. Does anyone else have any other questions? I want to thank you, Ross, for keeping up with the stuff in the Q&A in the chat. It was great.
Oh yeah, my pleasure, my pleasure. And Andy, you know, thanks so much for everything you do for the visual effects community at large, not just the Flame community, but you know, I've been a longtime fan, and you know, it's people like you that give back and share the wealth of knowledge, and Dan obviously. So I just really appreciate both you guys. And I would also just want, you know, to put on my cheesy sales hat for 1 second.
No, please do.
You know, we did do that we did do the Black Friday sale, and although it's over on our website, or we said it's over, the sale is extended through the weekend and through all of next week. You're going to see an announcement coming tomorrow morning from BorisFX that will do the whole Cyber Monday, and we'll keep the sale going for another 5 days. So it's a great time to pick up any of the BorisFX products.
Awesome, that's great. Great. I know we just did, so I would encourage everybody else to go ahead and take advantage of the sale. That's great. Well, thank you both, guys. We're going to give away some prizes now, which I know is everybody's favorite part of a demo. So let me go ahead and do this, and maybe do a little bit of this, and you know, get down to the business of giving stuff away. Oh, Jeff, I knew you were waiting for prizes. And for the first time, I actually got it right. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look here. I've got this handy-dandy name picker website here, which today, at least on today's refresh, is brought to you by, Shop. I don't even know if I can say their name. If I say the name of this product, it might get pulled from YouTube. This is very exciting. But so today we are giving away a 12-month subscription to the entire BorisFX suite, which is everything that the guys at Boris make, right? So we have, of course, Mocha, Silhouette, or Silhouette Paint, excuse me, Sapphire, Continuum, and Optics, correct?
Yeah, actually, it includes full Silhouette as well, I believe. Yeah,
oh,
so it's like the whole kit and caboodle, right?
Right. Hold on, I don't know if you can hear it, but I believe a contingent of Hell's Angels is now going up my street. Well, I guess it is the season. Okay, so here we go. Let's get this going. This is very exciting. And here are the names. Who will it be? Tim Farrell. Oh my God. Congratulations. Woohoo! Oh, wait. Oh, Tim, you won this already? Oh my God. You know what? I'm going to stop the celebration music there. And I just let's put on some inspirational music, because we're talking about a true mensch here. Okay. Tim Farrell. All right. A round of applause for Tim Farrell. Yes, he did win. That's right. You won this for One Frame of White. And rather than be, selfish and thinking of himself, he's thinking of the community. So thank you very much, Tim Farrell. We're going to roll the dice again here. And given my luck here, Tim's name will probably be drawn again. Here we go. Round and round they go. Where it stops, nobody knows. Brooks Tomlinson, ladies and gentlemen. Let's give it up for Brooks. Woohoo! Congratulations. Oh, that's great, Brooks. Congrats, man. I will send you an email and get you in touch with Ross and make that happen. Well, there you go. You see, it was wonderful. And I also have to give away today. I have one of these stylish, comfortable, and very functional Logik.tv masks provided by our friends at Synesys.io. Look great and stay safe with a Logik.tv mask from Synesys. So let's spin the digital wheel again one more time. Let's see who could possibly be the lucky recipient. MB. Oh my goodness. Congratulations, MB. This will get in the mail for you. All right. You know what? I'm feeling it's the season. Let's do one more. I'm looking at a giant box of Logik.tv masks right now. And Mark Wellington, ladies and gentlemen, congratulations. All right. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, congrats, everybody. Congrats, congrats. I'm going to go back to the slideshow here, and we'll close out this lovely episode of Logic Live. Okay, yes. Oh, here we have previous winners of some of the Logic.tv swag, right? We have Jamie Beckwith up there looking totally awesome with flame in the background and a nice kind of reflective sheen on his screen there. And of course, we had Carrie and Miriam and Mindy, Quinn, Peter, the aforementioned Jeff, Kyle, and Sybil. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And coming up on Logic Live next week, you know him, you love him, but do you really know him? We're going to get to know Grant Kay, the voice, the heart, and the soul of the Flame Learning Channel. That'll be next Sunday at 2 p.m. And then following that, perhaps you've heard of Tim Farrell. We're going to do a special episode we're calling Tips and Shtick with Tim Farrell. You're going to have to tune in to see how the scales balance in the tips versus shtick categories of the hour that we're going to spend together. I'm really, really looking forward to this. And on December 20th at 4 p.m., our first annual Logic Live holiday celebration. So please tune in. I think it's going to be just a wonderful way to say thank you to everybody for what has really been just a tremendous year for the community here. And of course, if you haven't signed up for the forum, please do, forum.logic.tv. Thank you again to Randy for all he's done to keep the forum going, to get the forum up and running and to keep it going. This episode of Logic Live and all the previous episodes of Logic Live are available at logic.tv, as well as some other great content. I have a new episode coming up for you this Friday on the Logic podcast. I interviewed Bilali Mack. We actually interviewed each other, and we had a great conversation about the role of a visual effects artist. And we're going to simultaneously release that on his Legends of VFX podcast and Logic podcast. You can find the Logic podcast on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, and on Spotify. And if you haven't already subscribed over at the YouTube channel, please do. And as always, Logic Live is brought to you by Synesys.io. They don't just make great masks, they make great, everything. Solutions, development, integration, and support, supporting flame artists since 1997, Synesys.io. That's going to do it for Logic Live this week. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Dan. And we will see you all next time.
Thank you.